guys, welcome back to our channel. It's Yvonne from Ginger Chick Rehab. I'm so glad to have you checking out what we're up to today. So if you are new to our channel, this is something I do with my husband Chris. We usually take thrift store found items and we make them over and we share the process with you all, our vision of how we make these things over, paint them up, fix them up, and get them ready to resell. And we resell them here locally at a local antique mall. But in today's video, I am showing you how I have been visiting Dollar Generals, and they have had a farmhouse line that I absolutely have loved. And I'm going to show you how I'm taking some of the Dollar General items and making them over and get them ready to resell. So in today's video, that is what it's all about. Some of the found items I had found while I am out and about. Man, there is a lot of Dollar Generals out there and they all carry something a little bit different than the next Dollar General. So you may find some of these items in your area, you may not find some of these items in your area, but I want to share what I did with these items. So let's get started. When I ran across these 3-tier trays at a Dollar General outside of town, I couldn't help but thought, okay, I'm going to create a Dollar General flip video for you all. Not my normal videos, but they've had so many cute things lately that I can redo and resell. So I thought, why not share it with you all? With the way that my thrift store areas prices have been going up, the $12 price tag does not intimidate me. As a reseller, I'm looking for stuff to be able to flip and to get in my booth. So I was happy to find some more cutting boards and these 2 Lazy Susans. And then look at this cute little bicycle bookends. I can definitely see flipping this. And I've done these crosses before. I simply love them. It is a nice heavy metal. And then that cute little stool. Oh my gosh, that $5 is what Goodwill would have sold it for. Now, did I need more birds? Well, yeah, because the store I was in, they were 50% off. And then I kind of saw these little bee flags and didn't know if I could create something out of those. Then another one of the stores I stopped in had these random animals on a stick, let's call them. And then I'd seen these bird cages before with the little lights, but then I had an idea of what I could do with those, and they were also a 50% off. And then $5 buckets. Okay, yep, they were definitely coming home with me. You all don't believe in God winks moments. Here's my story. I'm out thrifting an hour away from our house, and I'm like, nope, I'm not going to go to that Dollar General. That Dollar General never has anything. And as I drive by, I see a big banner that says remodeled. And I'm like, oh, okay, God. Okay, next thing you know, I'm turning around and going back in there and look at these beauties I found. So when you're looking at all these Dollar General items I found, they were all different Dollar Generals. I may have only walked out with one item, or the 2 bird cages, or the 2 tins, or those beautiful tier trays. I'll just touch on this just a little bit. I'm going to go through and remove all the Dollar General price tags. And then I'm not really a fan of this string. And then remember, not only the price tags, sometimes there is a label on the bottom. Now for these bird cages, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to open up that little clamp that keeps that hanging system that they have for the candle, and I'm just going to remove that. Now, even though these are new items, they still need to be cleaned. They've been packaged, they've been touched, I've touched them, who knows what else has touched them. So I'm going to go in and with some Superclean and some hot water and get them all wiped down. That way that I know that I have a good prep surface for when I'm going to be painting them. I like this wood on the top of this handle, so I'm just going to take some masking tape and just tape that off. I'm not going to be worried about the sides of it getting painted. I'm not going to try to go in there with tape. I just want most of that surface from the handle to be saved. And then this little stool needs to be sanded. They just kind of fakely distressed, rubbed that paint off, and so it's raised. So I'm just going to hand sand it until it's smooth. So now I've got everything placed on a board. We have a spray room, so I put them on the board so I can carry them in and out. It's a ventilated area in our workshop. So I'm going in with some Rust-Oleum, the paint and primer in one, and the flat black, and giving a lot of these Dollar General pieces a coat of black, and it might be their undercoat or it might be their finish coat. If you are newer to our channel and you have not seen us do this before, not only do we set those on boards, but we also in the spray room have a turntable. That way we can do the whole 360 of the item at the same time. And the boards are nice because then you aren't accidentally touching your piece, so you can move multiple pieces around. Now I just choose to use the Rust-Oleum paint and primer one in the spray can. It's just the ease of flipping. You could put it in a sprayer, you could hand paint them. It's just whatever choice you like. I like the Rust-Oleum paint and primer because these are multiple surfaces with wood and cement and resin and that particle-y MDF board. So definitely for me, this is just the choice to start off with. Now, when that is drying, I'm going to go over and take apart these tier trays. One thing I looked for when I was buying them, if they were going to be able to take apart, I probably still would have bought them and figured it out, but it was nice that I was able to remove this nut and be able to take this all apart. And then I thought, okay, well, I remember how all the nuts and the bolts and the washers and they all went together. I'm just going to slide them back on to this and nut it together so I know where my pieces and parts are and how it goes back together. Now, though I put these on boards, no, I am not going to be spraying these. Now, the bottom of these boards are a little bit different of a material than the top part, and you can kind of see where they have the little nails that hold these together. And I kind of thought that made it just a little bit cheap looking. And then those feet, I was thinking of putting new feet on, but they weren't removable. I would have been destroying that wood. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take that Waverly ink chalk paint and I'm going to try my best to go in. I like the black because black only takes one coat, guys. So I'm just going to go in with this Waverly ink chalk paint and just paint around that circle. There's a little bit of a lip on there that I can tell where I need to paint. So I'm just going to go in gingerly around those edges and paint these feet. That way it looks a little bit more high end that way. And I will be doing all three of the trays on their bottoms, and that one coat is working out perfect. It is such a raw dry wood that it's just soaking it right in. So now that I have all those painted, my black spray paint should be dry. If you have not watched my channel before, I do kind of a round robin type of game because something's always drying and something's always dry. So now I'm going to go over to the items that I spray painted black, and I'm going to seal that black in using some Rust-Oleum in clear. The black spray paint covers well and it's a great paint, but it's not ever your finished coat, so you need to go in with something. So for some of these items, they're staying black. This will be their final coat, and some of them I will be painting on with another color. As I was finishing spraying those, now look that's how raw that wood was. It just soaked that Waverly chalk paint right in. So I'm going to go on the bottom of these and seal that chalk paint in, just using some of this clear coat, trying to just stay on the black. So now I need to flip the items over and coat what I didn't get with that first coat. Sometimes a piece is more than just flipping it up and down, the top and the bottom, sometimes you have to hit it from all different angles so you don't miss a piece, because like these bird cages, you can see that teal would have just stuck out. Then even like these birds, I flip them over one side, I flip them over the other side, and there's still some of those details that just don't get sprayed. So you really want to look your pieces over before moving on to paint them something different or clear coating them. You can always paint back over it if you see, but that blue will definitely stick out that you've missed it. Now for me, this is a personal choice, and boy does it make sure you have a mask on if you're spraying, guys. Yeah, you could see, look at all that. Anyway, it's a personal choice that I want to paint the inside of this black also. That galvanized was just way too shiny for me. So now that clear coat is dry on the bottom of these trays, I'm going to go ahead with some Waverly antiquing wax. I'm still blessed, guys. My local Walmart still has it. I don't know why some do and some don't. And at first, I'm just going to go in and I'm just going to put full strength all over these. These are very raw wood, and so it's going to accept it rather well. And then I'm going to go back in with just a wet wipe and wipe the excess off. I want that grain of that wood to show through. I could have done the Waverly watered down mixture, but the type of the wood that this is, it would really raise that grain. It's already rough enough that I didn't want to raise it anymore. And then I'll go in the inside, and I'm really going to push with my fingers. There's quite a lip in there to make sure that I'm getting it. You could probably take a paintbrush maybe if you wanted to, but I'm achieving it. And then the same thing, I'm just covering the entire piece, and then I'll go back in with a wet wipe and take the excess off, just making sure that I can see that grain. Now after that final coat had dried, the black, and then I sealed it in with another coat of the clear coat to top coat it to make sure that it's on there good. I like to finish my black pieces up using some of this antiquing wax. It just is another level of protection of that paint, and then also it just richens up. It just gives it another look. I absolutely love if you're new to my channel, I am a fan of black and Waverly wax. So I don't know, I'm going to be sad if it ever goes away, but I do think there's other brown waxes out there that'll do the same. Now in this piece, I'm going to go ahead and apply a lot of it on, and then I'll go back through and wipe it off. And I know this MDF board will really just soak that wax in and fill it in. It'll just change the look altogether. Now to really finish these off, I need to seal them in. So I'm going to go ahead and use a couple coats of this polyacrylic, giving it a nice good coat. I'm going to spray it on, and what I'm using one of those bottles that give you a lot of problems. This polyacrylic, I love it, but sometimes when you use the sprayer, it gets that splits and splatters, and this is the perfect, because this wood is so raw, it's not going to matter. I can heavily apply it because I'm going to be needing to sand it. If I could have a field of vision, this wood is really rough. So over my Dollar General time of painting these little birdies, I have painted black, I've painted white, I've painted gray. So why not try some mineral? So I'm going in with that texture paint to make it a little bit more cementy, give it a little bit of texture on the birds, just equal parts. Now my choice for what I'm painting white, I'm going to be using this Rust-Oleum chalk paint in the white linen. I love the way it distresses, especially for this cross. Yeah, I'm going to have to give it a couple coats, and I'm going to have to flip it back and forth, but I love the way this white linen distresses. White usually always takes a couple coats, if not more, to cover, and when I put that black base coat on, it actually helps the white adhere better. The black is the color that I want to see when I'm distressing, but it really does the overall look. The black helps the other coat adhere better, and then it covers up, like on those birdies, that blue. So the other two pieces that I'm going to be painting white are these two buckets. And so I'm going to go in and give them my version of enamelware, where the inside's still going to stay black, but I want to put some kind of a
little something on the front of it. So I'm going to go in and I'm just, when I come to the little seams, I'm going to go very gingerly. And since this is a flatter surface, it's definitely going to take me a couple coats to get it to completely cover. So when I'm doing this chalk paint and when I come down to my second and third coat of the chalk paint to get this to cover, I like to just dip my brush in water. That kind of waters it down so the chalk paint can be thick, and then if I didn't water it down, it might start pulling off my paint. So this is what works for me. I just dip my paint in water. It was shared with me from a viewer and it's worked out wonderful. I know some people spray, there's a whole bunch of techniques, but this is what works for me, dipping it in water and then dipping it in the paint. And then I like these little fan brushes. They help get underneath that little lip, that detail just a little bit better. Then I like to go in with these other brushes. We all like what brushes we like, but for me, I like these little brushes that you get in that Walmart paint section where the Waverly paints usually are, in my store anyway, that have those white bristles. They're just nice and soft. I'm sure there's some proper name for them, but they aren't so stiff and heavy that they pull away the paint. So I know I could show you one of these and finish it from start to end, but this is just how I video. Something's always waiting to be dried. So now I'm flipping back over to these tier tray pieces, and I'm using my sanding sponge because I can fold it over and get it kind of molds around this. After putting the Waverly on there, the pieces were already raw and really rough, and I really wanted to sand that down. So I did 2 to 3 coats, depending on what I felt it needed on each one of these trays of that polyacrylic. And yep, I'm just going in and sanding it off. It's not going to take that stain off. I want to get that sharp edge that each one of those trays had, and then I just want to sand it down till it's nice and smooth. And then after getting them all sanded down that they're nice and smooth, I'm going to go ahead and finish them up with some of this Varathane finishing wax. I'm just going to wipe it on and then wipe off the excess. And these will just be brand new trays for this tier tray. Now I waited for the Varathane wax to dry some before putting them back together, and this is where it comes in handy. I'm like, yep, that goes there, this goes there. I can take these back apart, remembering how the nuts and the little washers all go. Then this little cross only took 2 coats to cover, so I'm going in with just a wet wipe, and I'm just going to be distressing those edges. For this piece, I'm just going to go down the edges. That Rust-Oleum paint just distresses so nice. And then I'm going to go back in over the front of the piece and really work that paint, getting some of that paint off, just to show all that beautiful detail of this cross. And as I'm using that wet wipe, sometimes it looks a little bit gray, that watered down cloudiness is just sitting there. So I just take a paper towel, a dry cloth, and just wipe it off so that black shows through. So like I have said, I have done a lot of these little birdies. I think they're a year-round thing that anybody would buy a bird. So I wasn't really sure if that white wax would be enough to pop the little details. So I added a little bit of the antiquing wax in. So I'm just going to go ahead and then just try to wipe this all on that little birdie, letting it hit into all that detailed pieces, and then wipe off the excess. Now, after doing the other bird, I just wasn't convinced that that was enough to show off the details. So I'm like, here we go. I'm going in full strength with that Waverly antiquing wax. So I'm just going to go gingerly in there where I know all the detail areas are, and then take that and wipe it off. And hopefully, I think this is going to make it pop a little bit more. I want those details to really show, and I definitely don't mind the antiquing wax aging this a little bit also. There, I definitely think that I like that a little bit better. You can definitely see those details now. Now for this cross, I definitely need to seal in that white chalk paint. And then I'm just going to go ahead and spray these birdies. This clear coat goes a long way, and it doesn't take much for it to seal in these chalk paints. Did you wonder where these were in the groupings? Did you think that I forgot about these galvanized? For the $15, I'm not going to spend the time painting them unless for some reason in a year's time they do not sell. But the first thing I'm going to do is that bolt was loose, that nut was loose on these handles, so I'm going to go in and tighten that up. Then I don't like the thought of that metal scratching up somebody's countertop, so I had to go into my stash to see what I may have that I can rise those up. Cost efficient, it's still $15. I still don't want to overdo it, but I do have this little weird bin of random wooden items I pick up when I'm thrifting, and so in my mind, I knew that I had some little round, just some flat pieces, not knobs, not giving them legs, just something to keep it off somebody's counter that it's not going to be scratching them up. And I think these are the perfect size. But before attaching them, I'm going to give them 2 to 3 coats of clear coat. They're really raw wood, and it just like those 3 tiered wood risers that I did. When it comes to really raw wood like that, it just absorbs in any water, any spill. So I want to make sure that these are good and sealed in. Even though you're really not going to see them, still I don't want them absorbing anything that might have spilled near it. So now to glue these down metal against wood, I'm using the Starbond CA glue. I'm using the thick one. Now I put a little dab of glue on the wood round, and then if you saw me, I sprayed that metal, so that metal's still wet from that spray, and then I quickly turned that upside down. That helps if you can't get to the CA glue to dry it where the glue is underneath something. You just spray that surface just like that, and that way in 15 seconds that is a permanent bond. Now that I let these turntable Lazy Susans and the cutting boards dry overnight, I'm going to go in with the Black & Decker little mouse sander. With some 220 sandpaper, I'm just going to hold it down lightly, meaning I'm not pushing it, trying to remove the paint. I just want to get any of the brush stroke feel off of these, along with letting it run on the edges just a little bit to reveal some of that black and some of that natural wood underneath. Just giving them a nice distressing and a good, nice finish sanding. Now I'm going to go into my house where I do most of my detailing. Sometimes I do it in the workshop. So I'm just going to make sure that I got all that sanding dust off there. I may need a towel. I don't think my hand is enough. So I ran across this beautiful stencil at Joann's. I believe they were a 40% off sale, so I've made it very cost efficient, and it's a nice little size. I've tried cutting these out with my Cricut and my Silhouette, but whew, is that ever time consuming? So I'm going to try the technique. I got one of those little dollar store stenciling brushes. I watched another lady on YouTube and how she was doing with a brush to do the stencils, where I usually use the makeup sponge. Dollar Tree has kind of changed the makeup sponges, so they're not doing the same holding of the paint as they had before. So I thought, why not give this a try? Before spending the money on an more expensive stenciling brush, I thought, hey, for $1, why not try this? So you do the same thing as with the makeup sponge, where you just have minimal paint on the brush, and then you do that rubbing technique. And you see me doing little circles. I start off on the stencil first before going into the open area, and then just work myself around, just reloading it, but making sure that most of it is off. I'm actually quite pleased and quite surprised by it. It is actually beautiful. So I'm going to be placing 3 off-centered of these stencils. So I'm going to take a blow dryer to make sure that this stencil is good and dry. Even though with minimal paint like that, the dry time is minimal, but I don't have patience to wait for my paint to dry. And then I'm going to make sure that the stencil itself is dry and doesn't have wet paint on it also. So when I'm doing round objects like this, I don't necessarily put a whole stencil on. This one's a smaller size turntable, so I'm just guesstimating. So I pretty much put the whole thing on. The first one like through more than 3/4, and now this one I'm going to go ahead and half. But I'm liking this way of putting the stencil paint on. I've never done it before. Probably not going to buy another one of the Dollar Tree brushes only because all the bristles are falling out. But hey, this was a good way to experiment and see if I like the technique or not. So for my next one, I'm going to try it on a little bit wider spaced open space stencil. I have this Waverly stencil that I've used a lot of times. I really like it. So I'm going to see how probably the smaller brush, I'll try to go really gingerly, but doing that same where I off-center the round pattern on this little turntable. I definitely love the shaded areas on this a lot. And I'll just do that same thing like I did with the first one, just off-centering them. Just eyeball what you think is pleasing to your eye. So when it comes to DIY and it comes to crafting, you know, the paint color is one choice, and for me, with the black and white, sometimes the paint color is very easy. But when it comes to all these little details, oh my gosh, I think that is the hardest decision of any craft project, is coming up with the idea of what you're going to do. That's where all these YouTube videos and all of us sharing all our ideas together, Pinterest, and anywhere that you can get inspired by others' ideas and then just tweak them into your own. So having that being said, yep, coming up with the idea for all these different projects that I do, I am so glad that you all are watching, and I'm always amazed that you guys like my creativeness, so I thank you so much for that. So now I've done these cutting boards from the Dollar General before. I left them the plain wood color. I did some stenciling on them, but this time I'm going to go into that farmhouse, that cottage core that my heart really loves. Those other ones I did were a little bit on the bohemian kind of vibe. So for this one, a farmhouse, when I stencil on farmhouse, that always sells for me still. Remember, I'm in a rural farming community, so I have this random stamp set that I found at the Goodwill. I love the size of these letters, so I'm going to start right off with just putting them in the line and off-centering the word farmhouse on this first cutting board. So as I was talking with what I was doing, what I did was put down all my letters first, then grab them with my flexible stamping mount, and then where the little masking tape was, I knew where my center point was. That's why I put that down, so I knew where, after I'd inked it with that StazOn ink, where to re-put the letters back down, so I knew I was in the exact same space. So of course, you know me, I gotta add a few little grain sack stripes to this. So that's I can share with you at the end or in the middle of this video. I'm not sure where I should share this, but I made one first. I did the grain sack stripes, then I put the letters down, and it was an epic fail. Yep, they do happen. I do have epic fails. The nice thing is it's just paint. You just paint over it. You keep doing something until you love it. And note, my letters, I had to really look at the bottom of those letters to make sure that they were straight on the second. Sometimes it's not just the bottom of the stamp. You got to really look at where that letter ends, and that's where I failed. I didn't really look at where the bottom ends. So I'm going to make sure, using the heat of the blow dryer, these have cured overnight. I've sanded them. Hopefully it's not going to pull any of the tape off or paint off. That's why I heat up that tape. I always prefer to use the masking tape when I do grain sack striking stripes because I can see through it. I know some people like painter's tapes, but I got control issues, so I like to be able to see where my first paint stripe is and how much space I'm leaving, and then where I'm going from the next one. And if you want to double check your measurements, you can use a ruler, because sometimes your eyeball deceives you. Now, between the StazOn ink and the Apple Barrel multi-use paint that I'm using, it's a little bit different of a color. I do 2 coats of the black to make sure that it's covered, that you don't see the makeup sponges, like I said, from the Dollar Tree, are a little bit more spongy, so you can really see where you're bouncing now. So I do have to really maybe rethink that, or maybe it's just the grouping that just came in, and maybe buy some more and see what happens. But yeah, I'm definitely going to heat up that tape to make sure it doesn't pull any of my paint off. And then so that the stripes aren't so overpowering of the farmhouse wording, which is a little bit lighter, I'm going to go in with some gently used 220 sandpaper. I bring the older stuff that I've well used into the house when I'm doing stenciling like that. I don't want to remove it. I just want to give it a little bit of age to look like it's always been there. You know, I've got 5 different of these cutting boards to try to come up with. Yep, I could mass produce and do the same thing, which it may happen. But right now I had got some inspirations off of Pinterest, saw a number 6, saw a numbered sign, so I came up with 57. So reminds me of Heinz 57. So I'm just going to my Cricut, just typing out some basic numbers and using some fonts and then sizing it to what is size appropriate for the cutting boards. When I design my stencil using vinyl, I always cut as close to the image as I can. That way for me, it's easier for me to center. So now I just got my 2 cutting boards here out, and now I'm going to use some transfer tape and put these onto the cutting boards. Now the same thing, I'm just using that makeup sponge and a couple coats of the Apple Barrel multi-use paint in black, and of course I'm impatient for paint to dry, so I use the blow dryer to help with the assistance of that. I also use it to help release that sticky for the back of that vinyl. There again, that helps just like the masking tape, so it doesn't accidentally pull off my paint. My hopes are anyway. And yep, I will be sanding these a little bit too, even though I'm not sure about that number 57 at the moment. What looked good on the Cricut may not look good on the board. So is it fair to say that this is my favorite stamp set? This Tim Holtz animal stamps that I'd gotten from scrapbook.com. When I put this on something in my booth, it always sells. There's such a array that you can do with the animals and that little wording that comes with it, the little promotional wording, so yep, farming community, yep, I couldn't help myself. Once I rearranged these a little bit, I definitely loved how these turned out. And I have well loved my stamp sets already, so I do use double stick tape on them. I have some trust issues, nothing like having a stamp that's been inked fall onto your project. So I do, for security issues now, I use a little bit of double stick tape on the back of my stamps to make sure that you don't fall off. I've tried all your tricks. I've tried washing them with Dawn dish soap. I've tried re-wetting them. I've tried everybody's tips. I tried. So I'm just right now, the only thing that I can find is the double stick tape, and it's working out. The one thing I do find is trying to make sure that I have enough pressure evenly on the stamps to make sure that I'm getting the whole image. Previous video I had tried my acrylic stamping block, but this time, since I had my little scraper out, oh my gosh, look how well that scraper helped. That is the best image of these, especially that sheep, that I've ever gotten. Yep, I couldn't help myself after those images turned out so well. I'm not a fan of the number 57, so yep, I'm going to center those animals in a different array and probably take paint and take off that number 57. You can always repaint something, so definitely absolutely loved how these animals turned out. That scraper that I have for my Cricut, oh my gosh, I just absolutely love using that with the stamps. Little happy things that you learn along while you're crafting, and I hope that I've shared that tip, and I hope it all works for you guys too. Yep, I took it out to the workshop, put a couple coats of that Kills Paint and Primer, and got rid of bye-bye number 57. Sometimes, that's why I always say, you do something till you love it. It's just paint. You can repaint over it. Now I just have to try to sand and blend that in as best as I can. Okay, just because I loved it that much, I can't, you don't know if somebody else is going to love it that much. So I thought, you know what, this is a cutting board. It's a decorative piece. It's a decorative piece. Yeah, we would not use this as a cutting board now. So I'm going to go in and just make, the chicken does really well. I have lots of chicken fans in our area. So, and the chicken's tall, so that's nice. So the chicken fills up a lot of that space, those IOD animal stamps. And then I have these other wording ones that the kitchen, for the space that I needed, the kitchen fits in there perfectly. So just a simple chicken with kitchen, because of course it's a cutting board and maybe they want it in their kitchen. If you noticed here on the bottom, I put a piece of the masking tape. That gives me a line for all those letters that I put down. And then when I took my stamping mount, I made sure that the letters are all even across. They're all on one of the lines. And so after I get it all inked up, when I go back to flip it over to transfer the image on, I know where to put my stamping mount so I can line up that line with the top of that masking tape. That way that I know that I'm good and leveled. You know, or I'll have to repaint again, but you know, it's the perfectly imperfect of crafting. Then just by chance, my letters are over my masking tape just a wee bit. After I get it on, I take that masking tape off. When I had painted this little stool black I thought I was really going to put some grain sag stripes on it, but I loved this so much. Oh my gosh, I just absolutely love this stencil so much. And look at God Wink Moment. It's like the perfect size. Well, almost the perfect size that I got to measure just a little bit to make sure that I'm centered as best as I can anyway. So I rinsed that little stencil brush out. I dried it as best as I can. Now I'm going to try that same little, not a lot of paint on this little brush, swirling technique to apply the white on this stencil onto this little black stool also. So just doing that swirling pattern, not a heavy hand, just let it like you're dusting. Now I want to take off just a little bit of the really overly bright white. That's just the look that I'm going for. I have this piece of drop cloth that I had done some antiquing wax with. So what I'm doing is I'm just rubbing it on a little bit. I'm not adding any more antiquing wax in it. I'm just having it take out that bright white, just give it that aged look. So when I showed you my haul, I really wanted these bees to fit, but I was like, oh yeah, that's just not the ginger chick. I really wanted them. I actually tested a piece of the discarded piece with some antiquing wax. It covered the whole image up. You couldn't see it. I really wanted that wreath around there, but it was too big for these buckets. But good thing these things were on a clearance at half price because I cut one up just to waste it. But I'll probably save that bee. You never know. There might be something that comes along the line that I can use it on. So I'm going to go back to my faithful, my I See Parents stamp, and use the bee and wreath from this pattern. I wanted to share that with you. Maybe that is somebody else's vision. Those flags from the Dollar General are just like some of the decoupage paper that I have ordered before and used. So I thought I would just throw it out there. That's why I added it in. So instead of trying to stamp on a round object, I'm going to be stamping on some tissue paper. So my IC pair stamps have no stickum whatsoever, so I definitely have to use the double stick paint on the back of these. So yep, I'm just going to use that entire stamp, some StazOn ink, and stamp it right on to tissue paper. And the nice thing about stamping on tissue paper, you just keep doing the stamp until you love the image that it transfers. When I did that one, it must have slid a little bit, so it had some blurred vision going on. So I just know next time it'd be a little bit more gingerly when I'm rubbing it. Maybe it was the way I put it down. Maybe it was the rubbing it with the Cricut scraping tool. And so I'm just going to make sure holding the stamp this time as I'm rubbing on it. Yep. And I bought the tissue paper at the Dollar Tree too. And I have all these corners and all the space to use. And I love that one. That one transferred good. So I need two of the images. I'm going to do both buckets the same. The bees always sell well in my booth. So yep, I'm going to do two of the exact same. Not always do I do that, but sometimes when you know that it sells well, why not? So you might be shopping with a friend and they both want the same item. Now to get the pieces and parts out of the tissue paper, I'm just going to take a little bit of a paintbrush, a little bitty head, just some water. You all taught me this on how to tear tissue paper, not to cut it because it doesn't really cut very well. So yep, I'm just going to try to make a straight line with water and then go in and then just start ripping the image out. It just tears so easily, but when you're transferring it onto your object, there's not that harsh cut line. It's a little bit more of a free-flowing where it blends into the object that you're gluing it on. So to make sure that my bucket one stays center and that it doesn't roll on me during this process, I just have a couple lint rollers that stick to the mat and then they're sticking to the bucket itself. That way that I can make sure that I am going to stay centered when I put my image on. So now I'm just going to decide where I want my image to be. I don't necessarily want it in the center, kind of up high. There's some lines in this, so I'm kind of centering it around there, and then I'm going to make sure using a ruler at the bottom to make sure that I am level. Yep, I've done that before when I didn't double check my measurements and it kind of went wonky. You do have a little bit of play with the Mod Podge if you put it down and you realize that it's a little wonky, that if you gingerly take it off in a short period of time, you may be able to move it. So I'm just going to be using some Mod Podge to adhere it, and I like to get it all centered and then fold it in half like this and get the one half glued down first instead of trying to do the whole image at once. This is what works best for me. That way I'm able to apply the glue, I'm able to work it from the middle out, I'm staying level, I'm not getting too many air pockets this way. You know, you all just do what works for you, but for me, I like to work from the center out and then pull up the other side and do the exact same thing. And then I just put another layer of Mod Podge on the top. And yep, I like to do that center thing so that way I'm not wrinkling my tissue paper. And then I take a little bit of wet wipe going around the edges and make sure that I don't have an abundance of the Mod Podge just left over. And then I kind of do a tapping technique, making sure that my seam is all just blended in. Now I need to seal my images in my tissue paper where I've done my stencils. So I'm just going in with some Rust-Oleum and clear coat and matte just to make sure that these images, especially the apple barrel paint, there isn't anything really to keep that on, that you need to seal them in. And for me, my last finish up, if you don't mind the way that your products feel and you want the clear coat to be your product, but we are absolutely obsessed with the way this Varathane finishing wax leaves our items so smooth to the touch. So I always go in and give it just a nice coat, wax on and wax off, just like the Karate Kid, any of the excess. So how many of you were wondering if I was going to add some jute to the top of these cutting boards? Well, here's your answer. Yep, I'm just going to wrap a little bit of the jute around the handles of these cutting boards. I'm not going to add any greenery. I don't want to take away from the image that's on there. But yep, if you were guessing that I was going to do this, you were exactly right.
Okay guys, so what did you think of my Dollar General flips? I know that I have done Hobby Lobby clearance and I have done a few little Dollar General flips, but this is a whole video on all Dollar General. So I hope that I have inspired you not only to look at clearance items when you're shopping, but also just at the Dollar General. The price tag kind of matches what the thrift stores are charging right now, so it's a win-win. So I thank you so much for watching today's video, and don't forget to give me a quick comment. Please keep them positive. And I thank you so much for watching today's video, and if you're part of our YouTube family, thank you so much. And if you enjoyed this kind of content and you're visiting our channel for the first time, hit that subscription button along with the notification bell so you know when we've uploaded a new video, and we'll see you next time, guys. Bye.